Hi and welcome to tonight's stream. We've got Paul on tonight, no guest I'm afraid, but Paul will tell you a little bit more about why we're not live streaming tonight at the end of the show. Paul has got some new accounts and old accounts, but stay tuned because I'm sure it's going to be good. Welcome to today's show, Paul.
Thank you very much, Les, and another week's passed and here we are again. As the people listening today have gathered, sorry about no live stream, guys, but we've a few little bits that we want to talk about, so let's hope that you find it interesting. As you know, Les, we've discussed a few things over the last few days, and obviously we've been getting ready for our project that we're working on as well, but is there anything you want to say, Les?
Well, I know you get a lot of reports in, Paul, either by email, Facebook pages and the like. Has any recent sightings come across to you recently?
Yeah, we got one. I got one yesterday. We'll probably touch on in a while, but in relation to, I don't know, I like looking for these lights over the sea. I mean, I must sound a bit sad when I'm all on about it, but that's the nature of the beast. I will keep going out there till I can actually get them on film and get some credible evidence of what they are. I don't know, but evidence that they're actually there is what we're after. And a few weeks ago, I received a message from a guy in Filey who's got a business in Filey, and he locked his premises up at approximately, I think it was 23 minutes past 11 on the Friday. I think it was the Friday night. I mean, I haven't got the dates in front of me, but he's walking back home to his property. Obviously, he lives in Filey, this guy, and he's overlooking the sea. And as he's walking, it's quite late in the evening, he observes two white lights out over the sea, under the ocean, under the water, and a purple light. He stops because they've caught his attention. He says they're in between Filey Bay and Speeton and Bempton, if you like, and they're out there. He estimates about 10 miles out, but they're big, and they're sort of moving about quite erratically and then stopping. I got on phone to this guy. We've had a conversation about it, and he said next thing they come out of the water. So we've got something. If he's telling the truth, and I've no reason to believe otherwise. I mean, I've spoke to this guy on and off for a number of years. It's the first time he's ever told me anything like this. They've come out of the water, two white lights, one purple light, and they're moving about erratically on above the water. Now he's mesmerised, rings his wife. She comes to have a look. She tries to film them on a phone. It's been unsuccessful. But everybody, we're in the dark with a mobile phone. We're best will in the world. We've got expensive cameras and we're struggling to catch this stuff. So basically they're watching these lights. At one point he said they merged and became one. Split up again, they're doing their own thing. Now I think he said 23 minutes past 11. It was just before 12:30 that they'd finished watching this sort of spectacular light show, and I don't know whether they went back into sea. I think that's what he said. And obviously they made their way home. But what's interesting here, Les, it was the same day, so I could easily get my dates. It's just that I haven't got the paperwork in front of me.
Yeah.
That Filey Bay, I think it was a 4-metre basking shark beached and had to be destroyed. Now, we know that happens. We know that whales, sharks do beach all over the world, but that's an interesting one. Then there's a pod of dolphins in the bay. I think they're bottlenose dolphins that wouldn't leave the bay. So I mean, to sort of taking it into the land of woo-woo too much to say that there was something discouraging the mammals and the shark from leaving the bay. I don't know, but that's the same day. Now, a few days later, and this is I found this interesting. I don't know what listeners will want to make of it, and if I've spoke about it before, I do apologise, but it's just a few days later on what's called Newsham Hill, coming into Bempton. Myself and Bob Brown went trying to film these lights once again, and on the way back we saw police on Newsham Hill just before the crossings. we drove past, we didn't realise what were happening. And we saw on Facebook, or social media shall we say, that a tree had split in half and fell onto some telegraph wires, and obviously caused a power outage in Bempton.
Yeah.
And I think we did touch on it on one of the other sort of talks, but we'll just run through it again. There's a guy passed comment to a chap called David Hind that he was less than 50 yards away when this happened. He was at the other side of the road talking to a guy who was putting a horse into his paddock. The horse, before this happened, the horse bolted, and he couldn't control it. In the neighbouring field, sheep went to the top end of the field and just huddled together. This is before the tree fell. They found that highly unusual. Then what he observed, and he said 30 yards either side of where this tree was, the wires on the telegraph wires were arcing and cracking and banging, and there were blue coming off them.
Yeah.
Now this happened before the tree fell, and then suddenly the tree split in half and fell. Now there could be a perfectly rational explanation to this. It's probably nothing to do with the lights at Filey. We can't attribute everything that we're talking about to be connected to each other, but they're just a group of unusual things that happen.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
No,
can I bring you back to the sighting of the lights?
Yeah.
Now these lights were seen underwater.
That's
so
correct,
how glowing were these lights? I mean, are we talking, what size would he attribute these to be?
He said they were big, Les, and very, very illuminated underwater. 2 white, 1 purple. And we're talking 10 miles out, so they must have been fairly big.
10 miles out, yeah.
You have a rough idea. If you live along the coast, you have a rough idea what you've got to horizon. People will have heard me saying on numerous occasions, when you're up around Speeton and Buckton, you've got sort of 20 to 22 miles to horizon at that elevation. So, Filey's not as high. I think you were on the crescent at Filey, to be honest with you. So they've probably got 17 miles to horizon. He's estimating that they're 10 miles out, and these are big and illuminated. And obviously they're slightly to right, because he said they were in between the bay and Bempton and Speeton and Bempton. But once again, we've got these areas throwing up these anomalies. Yeah. Now, late at night, nobody else reported it. I've just got that report from this guy. There's nothing to link any of the things that I've spoken about. But I think they're worth noting due to close proximity.
I mean, it would be interesting to know whether any seafarers see these and report them, wouldn't it? You'd only hear these through the Coast Guard, wouldn't you? Obviously.
You would, but you'd struggle to get the information from Coast Guard unless you put a Freedom of Information request in. Yeah. Which is exactly what I did in March of this year for Dave Barker, who lives on, I'll not say where he lives, who lives at Flamborough. Yeah. And Dave won't mention his name, but I'll not say where he lives. And I think we've done that story as well, but I can run it past you, Les, if you want.
Yeah, sure, which gives a brief recap.
The exact date I can't remember. Someone tells me it was March the 7th, but it was March 2019, and he's travelling home from Bridlington. As he approaches Danes Dyke, he sees a huge sphere of light above the dyke, or it perceives to be. It's there. Thinks it's the dragon light, the searchlight from something like the police helicopter. And I don't think they even stopped. They just carried on driving. There's just something, oh, look at that. It's an interesting thing. So when he gets home, he's parked his car down the side of his house and his wife's gone in. And he's not direct views of the sea, but his property's looking in the direction of Flamborough Lighthouse. And obviously, then you would have sort of Bempton and to the left-hand side. He said, and he sees this huge white light just literally open up, and that's what they do. They appear to sort of open up, and then he saw another one, and then eventually there's a configuration of 5 of these lights that look like a dice, 5 of a dice. Then he sees a row of them. At one time he says there was about 10 of them, and they're a pale orange colour, the lights. I'll tell you what's interesting. When I spoke to Dave about this initially, because he contacted me, he said they were white lights. This is not Dave fabricating his story, but this is just the nature of how things are. And when I put the Freedom of Information request in to Coast Guard, because well, we'll get to that part of it in a bit. When they got the report back, the reports were of yellow and orange lights, and there were multiple. There were other people that had reported them as well.
Yeah.
So he's watching these lights, and I will say he's watching them for 10, 15 minutes. Didn't think to take a picture, and because you get a lot of people where they're so quick to say, "Why didn't you take a picture? Everybody's got a phone." He's lived there a lot of years. He's seen the helicopters. He knows what the lighthouse looks like. He's seen all manner of things in sky. These were so different. You just sort of stand there. You're a bit taken back by it. It's something really unusual. So eventually, we did go inside and said, "You better come out and have a look at this," to his wife. When his wife came out, nothing. They'd gone.
Yeah.
He rang the police. 101. They contacted Coast Guard. Coast Guard rang him. We've got the exact times and everything. That's why we got the correct dates, because he couldn't remember the date at first. And I asked him to contact his phone provider, because he wouldn't have made many calls to the police, so that one would stand out. You see, so anyway, we established that. Coast Guard rang him. Coast Guard, I wouldn't say admitted, but told him on the phone there was no military exercise out at sea. There was nothing that they could think of that could have caused these lights. So that had already been established, which were good in a way, because that's been the staple explanation for a lot of these lights over the years, a military exercise. You can't get no further. You just cannot get no further than when that's been said. It's a sweeping statement. It's a blanket cover that it covers everything. So this were good. So we've got Dave's lights that are seen out at sea, and they're not uncommon. That were 2019. I saw them with a group of guys that came up to Bempton, and we had a incredible sightings of them, and it's almost like they're performing for you, and it doesn't happen for me. It's when you take somebody different up, and I don't mean every time. I took a very good friend up called Lee Hayward, and Lee will openly put his hand up and say, we're going to explain these away. He knows exactly what's in the sky, Les. Flight radar, he knows what's in the sea. You can look at something on his phone. I'm not that technical, and he'll tell you what boat it is. And we're seeing these lights. I'm driving down Cliff Lane, and he's asking me what they look like, and I literally turned to my right and I said, that. And they're just big tangerine coloured thing in the sky. Well, he's sort of immediately taken back, because it's not what he's expecting, because they're not flying from anywhere, they're not flying backwards or forwards, and it just disappeared. And during that night we were sort of treated to a sight of about, I don't know, 8 or 9 of these, sort of culminating above this hill, where incidentally quite a lot of unusual things happen, seeing 3. And I think we've done these stories, so I do apologise, listeners, but I still think I think they're interesting. We've got 3 in like a snooker ball rack type configuration, low. So I'm trying to get the tripod spun round, because we've got it facing sea. Lee's actually got visual on them more than me, and he's saying the light in the ground up below them, and they're in the field with us, be at the very end edge of the horizon, which I don't know, 500 yards away, 400 to 500 yards away. And as you're putting camera on, they're literally imploding. I'm not saying that they're disappearing because we're putting camera on. It was just unfortunate. But you're denied these little snippets of. It's hard to even call it evidence, Les, because we don't know what it's evidence of. Do you know what I'm saying? If we went up there,
sure, yeah.
Myself and Bob Brown tonight, and we were fortunate enough to film these lights, all we can do is present what we've filmed. I filmed one coming out at Filey Bay. Last year as well, with a police officer who was with me, and it were him that saw it lift out of the bay. It was sort of about 200 foot above when I saw it, and I filmed it all the way through. All we've got is evidence of something, because there's no name for these things. They're not recognised by any official body, and any official body that sees them wants to explain them away as something else, something plausible.
So, can I just come in here, Paul, and just, you can only speak for your own experiences and what other people tell you on this, but when these lights are prevalent, I mean, you might get 1, you might get 2, you might get a bunch of them. Is there any military scrambled after that? Do you hear any military in the sky? Because these lights are there.
We've thought that in the past. We've thought that particularly on the East and North Yorkshire wolds, when I used to go up there 2006 up to 2009 with Steve Ashbridge, and we would see these lights literally, as I've just described, over the sea, just switch on, become a multiple of 2, 3, 4, 5, switch off, appear in a different part of the sky, and then 10 minutes later you've got low flying jets. And we're not talking about a jet that's gone past and then dropped flares and you see them lighting up. These are after the event. There's a lot of farmers up there that have seen them, and they'd echo what I'm saying. I mean, some of them would openly do it and stick their head above parapet. Others will tell you these stories and never want to be sort of known that it's them that's sort of seen these things. Because I know there's one particular farmer that sits out there with a bottle of wine and sits actively looking for these things. So it is interesting.
In that respect, if he sees nothing but just drinks his wine, I think that's probably a good reason to be out. Yeah. And just on that note, I don't think I told you this, but I was at Flamborough a couple of weeks ago, and I did speak to the farmer's wife, and you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And just to let you know, the farmer is busy at the moment, she said, but he's probably willing to speak to you. Good. Obviously we're in autumn, winter time.
Yeah.
So,
this is good.
I think you can tell people what that's in relation to.
Well, it is in relation to lights again, as far as I know. And if it's the same guy that I've attempted to speak to on numerous occasions, and there's another one, and if it isn't this one, Les, then I do apologise. But there's a farmer that's got knowledge of something that landed on the cliff tops.
That's the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's one I've been chasing for a long time. I know it's real. I've got a good friend, Dean, the former butcher at Flamborough, who said as a schoolboy this thing landed on the cliff tops at Flamborough in September 1970.
Yeah. And
so people deduce from that what that's going to be about. Anybody with a UFO interest will know. And the lighthouse keeper, the former lighthouse keeper at Flamborough, told me the same thing. All people with no connection to each other. And I find it interesting that the people that are telling me these things, the same name for the farmer came up. I'm not going to say the name until I've actually spoken to him. He might not want me to use his name. In which case, I fully respect it.
Yeah, that wouldn't be fair at this moment in time, I don't think.
Fair, no.
Yeah. All right then. So just to move on a little bit then, Paul. So we have all this activity that you've reported on and what you know of at this moment. If you took whole of that activity and transposed it somewhere else, then what other events have took place around the world, do you think, what would be equivalent to what you've seen?
You know me, Les, and I sort of live in a little bubble, so my knowledge is limited of other. Well, I'm reluctant to call them UFO events. We don't know what they are. Other anomalous events around the world. But the first thing that comes to mind probably would be the Brown Mountain lights. Once again, excuse me, these lights are not unsimilar to what we've been observing East and North Yorkshire wolds. And they're not unique to me, by the way, Les, or Steve Ashbridge, or you. These things will have been seen long before I took an interest in them. It's just that, I'm trying to highlight them. There's something highly unusual happening. But the Brown Mountain lights, anybody who's not heard of them, you will find lots of, I think they're even on Wikipedia, there's lots of references to them, on internet pages, and people have observed them and studied them. They're in North Carolina, and they've literally these anomalous lights that just appear and appear in multiples and disappear. Not just in the sky though. This is interesting. They're appearing on the side of the mountain. It's a certain mountain range, and there'll be people far more qualified than me to talk about this. But they've been spoken about, these lights, by Cherokee Indians for over 800 years. Now that's incredible. That we've got so now if we're talking about 800 years, we can throw out all the theories of Chinese lanterns and flares and hot air balloons and military balloons. We can do away with all that because they're documented over 800 years ago by the Indian tribes. That's got to tell you that there's something other to what we're observing.
Yeah, I mean, is it true? I mean, I can't say I know a lot about the Brown Mountain lights, Paul, but is there theories that there's like an open door in the side of the mountains and they actually come out? Is there a theory going around like that?
You know, you're probably telling me things I didn't know, Les, and they could be. I mean, that could be somebody's way of explaining these things and perceiving what's happening. If we could stay with them for a moment, but just jump back, let's just jump back to Speeton. Yeah. And we've got a sighting that I've talked about before, the guy who was sat in that bar in Scarborough, and he could see the cliffs of Speeton.
Yeah.
And he saw the light. Remember, listeners, that the cliffs there are 420 feet at the highest point, so he saw a light that appeared to come out of the cliff. Now, I'm quick to point out, at no point did this guy say that he thought that there's a hole or an opening in the cliff. It just appeared near the cliff, halfway up it, so it's 200 foot up, we'll say, and then another one, until you've got 5 over the sea with a red light on top. But to some people, they would want to believe that there's some kind of opening in the cliff and there's something going in and out. Personally, I think that's an impossibility. I don't know how the mechanics of it work, but I'm just reporting what somebody's seen. So nobody's actually seen an opening. Now, with the Brown Mountain lights, I've no idea. That could be how it's perceived, that there's something within the mountain. They're probably looking at it as some kind of hollow mountain. And once again, I'm in no position to say yes or no. My personal opinion is no. These things, I think, can just materialise. And I think, Les, location is a key.
Yeah, and I think there's another similar area, and I think that's in Norway, and that's the famous Hessdalen lights, and I think they've been linked to the theory is that it's like plasma.
Yeah.
Would you go along with this? I mean, even the lights that you've seen, Paul,
they look like plasma. Yeah.
Where would you say they looked a bit like a plasma?
Yeah, there's almost a rippling effect in them. There's almost
you're seeing swelling and things like that.
Energy to what we're looking at, and you know, there's sort of two schools of thought with these Hessdalen, and probably with Brown Mountain, and probably with the lights that we're observing. And you know, I think the mistake would be if I just said, no, it's not plasma, because I've got no proof that it isn't. I've spoken quite a bit to Philip Mantle about this, because I know one of his friends was one of the researchers at Hessdalen, so he's a bit more knowledge than me. It's a pity we've not got Philip on. We ought to try one podcast to get Philip on, specifically to talk about this and other things. Now, Philip's of the belief that these are Earth lights, you know, the tectonic plates, and it's energy, and that's what we're seeing. His friend, the researcher, doesn't think that, but that's what I like about Philip, is he's not condemning his friend. He's open enough to think, well, I could be wrong, but that's what I think, and that is exactly where I am with this, Les. And I'm just messing with that. That's it. Something come on my screen. My personal opinion: there's an intelligence, there's an awareness to them. You've heard me, and other people have heard me say far too many times, you take someone new up there, these lights appear. An example that I keep giving, but we took the rock angler up there to tell us about the perceived spacecraft that he saw land on this hill. Incidentally, the same hill where myself and Lee Haywood saw the three, side of that, and the same hillside that Bob Brown took that anomalous picture a few weeks ago of the strange black blob on the horizon when there was nothing there. So, you know, have we got a location? Have we got some kind of I was reluctant to say portal, but we've got some kind of entry and exit point for unusual anomalous activity. So, but jumping back to it, I believe there's an awareness to them. Prime example: talking to the rock angler, Mick Sigson, telling us about what he saw in 1998, and I asked him if he'd seen the orange lights. Said he'd never seen them. Put the camera away. Literally within minutes, and there's three of us there. I mean, Mick can be traced. Everybody knows Bob Brown hangs about with me a lot. So Bob can be asked, and orange light appears in sky above us, then another one. Get the camera out, they switch off. You're not telling me that there's no awareness to that. It's of all the times in the day, of all the days in the week, in the year, that we go up with this guy, and that happens.
I mean, this comes back to when people say, well, you see all these lights, you have all these experience, and other people do, and you've just touched on it earlier, you have no footage, you have no camera footage, but you've just said there and then that you was filming, you was talking about to the rock anglers, and as soon as you put your camera away, bang,
they appear.
They appear. Now, and I've been up filming there with you on occasions, and we've had the camera out and seen nothing. But obviously, you know, other people round about them periods, I've seen balls of light.
That's correct. I mean, the night that the guy in Filey saw the lights under the sea, I were actually up there till turn 10 o'clock. We'd gone up there about 6:30 in the evening, and so I mean, he saw them. I think just jumping back to it, 23 minutes past 11. But so it's there. I don't mean it's playing with us. I mean, I'm not that vain that I think that it's playing with us. I just believe that there is some kind of awareness.
Well, now you say that, Paul. Now this could be madness on my part, a theory. Okay. It could be where these lights are seen 10 miles, 20 miles away on a good night, stood on the cliff top. But what if them lights are actually with us? So you're saying they seem to show knowledge and what's the other word? Just help me out here, Paul. Awareness, right? Yeah, and perhaps them lights aren't where they are, and perhaps them lights are actually with us.
Do you mean through our eyes? Do you think we're being do you mean we're being mind manipulated or something like that? I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
I think anything's possible. It's strange because I was in Caton this year. I'd forgotten about this, and we were driving home. We'll say in between 5 and 6 p.m. and we're just approaching the road to head back towards Bidlington, and one of these lights appeared. Couldn't see the sea, but it were over the sea. Yeah. I'd got the Sony camera in the back. I'd got the P900, and I'm thinking, shall I stop car? Is it worth stopping? And I thought, no, I'm going to get home, drop Mary off, and I'm going to go up there, see if I can capture some of these lights. Midpoint, Steve Ashbridge rings me. Now, bear in mind, I'm not even at Filey, so we're probably 25 miles away from Steve, and he says, I've just pulled up at home, and he's at Hornsey, and I can see lights over the sea. Now we're talking, and they're there. I can see them as well. I perceived them to be at Bempton. Steve perceived that they were at Hornsey. Now, Bempton to Hornsey is 15 miles, so it's a strange one. Just how big are they? And they never look any bigger. That's another thing as well. Apart from the ones that we saw at the back of us in the field with Lee Haywood, these things usually look about the same size, and they're a lot brighter than the biggest star you'll see in the sky. So I carried on driving anyway, and I decided I was gonna drop her off and go up to Bempton. And midpoint, 6 appeared. So Steve rings me again. He said, there's 6. I said, I know, we're looking at them. Mary could see them as well. And the guys in Scarborough, Chris Wright, and his friend Steve, they'd seen them as well. So they were on the beach. So, we'd got 2 here. We've got 5 witnesses. Now that's just 5 witnesses that are sort of corroborating together, who've got an interest. How many people saw them that night and just thought, oh, that's unusual? Well, because I think that's just the general thing. Oh, that's unusual. It doesn't really register that they're probably looking at something highly unusual, because they're not Chinese lanterns. They're opening up over the sea. They're not aircraft. They're not flying from anywhere. They're just appearing. I know I sound like I've got a passion for these things. I have got a passion, as in I want to get some proof so that me and you can play on here. This is what we're looking at, not fleeting glimpses as camera gets started and they've disappeared, which is all we're managing to get.
Yeah, well, there is one video on your YouTube channel which shows the light that you mentioned earlier coming from Farley Bay. It comes across, then disappears into the water. And yes, the quality you always wish it could be better quality. But nevertheless, you have got that phenomena
Yeah,
on
and
film.
it's not actually bad quality until it gets close in. And I need to say,
Hmm.
without these, I had
Yeah,
camcorder in my hand and I didn't have my glasses. I couldn't actually focus it.
yeah,
Long distance, my eyes are absolutely brilliant, but
yeah.
without glasses,
Well, for today's viewers, we'll stick a link up there somewhere where you can click on that link and you will be able to go and see that little bit of footage. It's only short, but it's there nevertheless.
yeah, that would be
So
good.
yeah.
And
So
there's the other bit of footage as well over Flamborough Head. I don't know if we can find that one, Les, where the light appears and then the red light appears off it. I'll see if I can find it and show you.
yeah, sure, yeah.
So we may be able to get that one up. Yeah.
Okay then. So yeah, I mean this
And
this
I mean,
is
sorry, Les, go on.
yeah. Go on, no, carry on.
Well, jumping back to before we end sort of Hestelan, I mean, these lights, incidentally, have been reported since the 1930s. I don't know what exact date, and they were very active in 81 to 84. So the early 1980s, and then they were active, but it died down again. Then it became active in 97, 98, which is interesting because these are all periods. The UFO activity never seems to stop, but at times it does seem particularly active. But 97, 98 UFO activity was very active, and in the early 1980s. And it's strange that these lights were prolific as well. I find that interesting. 97, 98
Yeah.
in the UK were very active with UFO activity.
Mm. Okay. Right. I think that brings us up to date with some of the recent sightings. I think cryptid sightings. Now I know we've got some reports on the cryptid sightings tonight. Paul, is there anything you can tell us on that?
There's not much for it, but it is interesting. Yesterday, I was contacted by a lady called Sarah, and I think she'd been just looking at some stuff on YouTube with her brother. I mean, I don't know this. I estimate that she's in her 30s, and something about Bempton and Flamborough had come up, and then something had come up about the Flixton werewolf and the reports of the strange things in Danes Dyke. And a brother called Andrew, these are real names, and I did ask if I could use the name, said, you need to tell this guy what you saw at Danes Dyke. And she'd not told nobody apart from her mum and her brother, and it were in 2016. And they were staying at the campsite. Anybody who's not familiar with the area, you drive from Bridlington into Danes Dyke, you'd have to Google Earth this area. But before you get to the entrance just after you get to the entrance of Danes Dyke, you go up onto a little rise, and on your left there's a campsite, touring caravans. And they were staying there. There was mum, brother, Andrew, and Sarah, his sister, and Sarah's son, who was 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old at the time. She believes it was 2016. Hopefully I'm going to speak to him today or in the next few days, and we're going to get an accurate date. She's pinpointed something that might be able to get us closer to a date. Not that it's going to have any bearing on sighting at this stage, but that's just nature of what I'm like. I want to get it as close as I can. So they've gone for a walk in Danes Dyke. Mum's not with them. There's just her, a brother, and a young son. They've entered the dyke. They're walking round it. It's a nice sunny day between 1 and 2 o'clock. Nothing to worry about. No strange feelings. No enveloping of silence like we've talked about before. Now, on the way out of Danes Dyke, it's like a big horseshoe, the actual road to travel in a car. And there on that road, as you come out on foot, and as you approach the end of the road, you can see a row of bungalows. I think there's about 6 bungalows. Look like they've been built in 1940, these old bungalows, and that's about all there is. And they're out of the dyke on the main road. That'll become relevant in a moment. So brothers just about at entrance with little lad they've been chasing about in woods. The woods at either side of the road, people, are no more than 70 foot wide each side. It's just a strip of woodland. The main area of Danes Dyke is further in, 1/4 of a mile away. So they're about 10, 15 feet away, her brother and son. Said, and behind her, right next to her ear, there was a growl. the most loud, guttural, terrifying growl this lady told me yesterday that she'd ever heard in her life. Now, she daren't turn round, she froze on the spot. She said it was literally on her shoulder. That's how close it was. Now, she said it only lasted 5 to 6 seconds. I said to her, well, you know, when we're comparing a growl, I know it's a weird thing to be talking to somebody about, and I don't think, unless this YouTube with something we'd done's ever come up, she'd have ever contacted me. It were a brother that prompted her. I said, if we're comparing this growl, compare it to a dog's growl or anything like that. She said, no. And I said, well, what about a lion or a bear? She said it sounded like nothing like a lion or a bear. She said it sounded like a dog, but something that was absolutely huge and monstrous. She said it shook my insides. She said, yet my brother and my son never heard it. They never heard a thing. It was just there in her ear. She said, normally they'd have took no notice of me, and I sort of said, come on, we've got to go, we've got to get out. She says, because that was the initial feeling that I've got, get out. I felt like I was being told to get out. And she said they must have sensed the urgency and fear, because they literally left with me. Mm-hmm. She said, I've no intention of coming back. She said, we left the next day. I'm not going to come back there ever again. But she's told me this story. I will get to speak to her again. And she's only told me, and her brother, I spoke to them both, by the way, yesterday. Yeah. Because in his words, he says, well, by relaying Sarah's story, someone else in that area or in that sort of locality might have experienced something similar. Now, you know, I find it interesting because I really appreciate her telling me this, because how many people would just step forward and tell you a story like that? So once again, we've got another unusual one. She didn't see a thing. There was nothing behind her, nothing physical, nothing to see. You know, she didn't move at first, but obviously when she told her brother to get out, they've looked back, there's nothing there. She's not in thick wood, it's not a dense woodland, it's a 70-foot width of wood either side of the road at most, and you can see through it to other side at fields. There's nothing there. So what we're dealing with, you know, once again, I'm just relaying stories, and there'll be some people saying that bloke's nuts, you know, but I'll jump back to it time and time again, Les.
Yeah, we'll take it. Yeah,
all walks of life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Reporting unusual things. They can't all be lying.
Well, take us to that account where you were in the woods at Danesdyke with your wife, and you felt something on your shoulder. So that's kind of where we're going with Danesdyke, aren't we?
Yeah, well, you make a good point there, Les, because literally I would have thought if we went through that wood and then crossed a field of about 300 yards, we'd have been in that wood. Just a little coppice that comes out into the fields. And I don't know year, I can't remember now. Someone tells me it might have been 2016, 17. And we'd both got cameras. We'd gone for a walk, nice sunny day, myself and Mary, and we walk. There's just a beaten path down between this wood. Once again, it's only 100 foot wide at the tops. And Mary's 20 foot away from me. My little dog, big as a rabbit, he's with her because he prefers her. But that's life. And so I just lifted the camera to take a picture, and something took hold of my jacket and pulled me backwards. Now, I look round, obviously you're looking for obvious, and I'm thinking I've snagged it on an hawthorn or something, because, you know, we're walking down a path and there's trees all around us, but I haven't snagged it. And it was a sensation that was strange. That's what did it. It weren't a tree anyway, there were no tree there, but it was the feeling. I tried for ages to give some kind of analogy to what that felt like. I thought about dampers on a car, you know, how they slowly come up on your boot, you know, on an hatchback, and then I thought, no, it weren't that. So the closest thing I can get to the feeling, Les, is if you've got two magnets and you push them together and they don't want to go together. And that's what it felt like. And it was the strangest feeling, no pain or anything, it was just weird. And my immediate thought was, is this what happens when people disappear? That just comes straight into my head. I pondered for, I don't know, a while, thinking about what had just happened, and then I didn't say out to her, I just carried on walking down the path. 10 minutes passed, could have been 5, I don't know, but short length of time passed, picked the camera up again, and it happened again. A second time. I've written about it, and I think we did a little bit of a video about it. It might be on there. Call it the magnetic pull, because that's exactly what it felt like. So we got. I mean, I think in the comments as well, which is interesting. I mean, I'm not saying these people are wrong, but they're coming up with all sorts of theories that I've had a muscle spasm and that's why. And I mean, at the end of the day, some of these people could be right, but the closest person to the source of what's happening, be it being pulled backwards, be it seeing a UFO, be it seeing a cryptid, is the actual witness. Because we've got loads of experts who step forward straight after the event, years after the event, and tell you what it could have been, tell you what could have happened, and this is the reason for it. The world's full of experts, but you know, I'm not saying the experts are very much needed as well, by the way, but in a lot of cases, when we're dealing with unexplained phenomena, the expert is the person on the day that's experiencing it, in my opinion, unless you're a complete half-wit, and you know, but basically most people have got enough common sense to know that when they've seen something that's totally unusual or highly anomalous, then that's what it is.
So in your experience there, when you had the grab on your shoulder, Paul,
Yeah.
This was unlike the lady who had the growl. Did you hear anything?
Didn't hear a thing. But it's in a similar area. I mean, we're probably talking 150, 200 yards, no more actually, because 70 foot of this woodland, and then we've got a few hundred yards. It's within 300 or 400 yards of that. It's just the strangeness, and then there's other reports from around that same bit of woodland. There's a report of somebody seeing red eyes looking at them from round a tree, but the tree wasn't wide enough to support it should have had a body at the back of it, but all they saw were red eyes.
Just the red eyes.
And the shape of a face, didn't know what it was. And there's a few reports like that.
Well, is this not like then the kind of the Predator, the film The Predator? Is that not like that kind of illusion? Do you think?
Well, I suppose it could be. Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't really know. I suppose it could be. I mean, there's talk of, particularly overseas, I've heard hunters on podcasts talk about seeing predator type movement, or the perception of movement that's just looking like distorted shapes through the trees. And right, I need to just jump to this. I'm not going to say this guy's name because he won't care for it, but and we might have done this one before, listeners, but this is similar to what Les is talking about. The Key Centre at Bridlington, at back of the Christ Church. It's a centre for food banks and counselling and addiction and things. A nice new building. It was built in 2007, I think. And how do I know that? Because the guy who did a lot of the joinery on it relayed a story to me. And we went behind the back and we looked at what he'd seen, and he's telling me this interesting story. And there's a passage that runs at the back of this, we'll call it a ginnel. You could just about drive a car up it, but you couldn't get two cars up it, and a pedestrian would have to stand very tight into its side. And there's a steel fence that's about 6 to 7 foot high, 3-inch wide strips of steel with the pointed prongs on the top. And he's standing back admiring his work this particular day after the job's finished I think it's 2007. And he's looking at the fence as well, and it's a sunny day, and he sees this ball of about I don't know, 3 or 4 foot round of jelly that he can see through it. It's like a mirage. Now he's not having some kind of bad eye day. He can see through this. When he's trying to work it out, he's looking at this thing. He can see clearly below the fence, 3 foot, and he can see above the fence. And there's this circle of wobbly light. He said, and then it set off moving and went down the fence all the way down until it just disappeared. Now, I wonder if we're looking at something similar there. He didn't see legs, he didn't see arms. I'm not going to embellish this story. I think it's fabulous enough without me having to do that. But I've not seen anything like that. The pull, that were a physical pull with a sensation that I've never experienced before. And if any people in comments said I had a muscle spasm, then fair enough. I don't think I did. It felt like two magnets that were pressed together, and it was just weird. And it happened twice. And the growl, no idea. This lady's reported hearing it. She could have embellished it. She could have said I turned round and I felt its breath on my neck and there were teeth. There's none of that. I've just got the raw bones of it. We've got a growl, a large guttural growl that shook my insides and terrified me. And while we're on with that, where the bungalows are,
yeah,
and this is like one of those stories when you said the farmer will speak to me all being well after harvest. I also know that one of the occupants of those bungalows, one winter's evening, and we'll go back years, I'm not even going to say a year because I've no idea, took his dog down that same road. He took his dog down the exit road of Danes Dyke. Whilst doing that, he stopped because there was, I think people might have heard me talking about this before as well, there was something large and canine sounding charging about in the undergrowth, but very big and heavy. He come out, it frightened him. He thought there was more than one. Now, anybody listening to this could say, well, yeah, well, it could have been a bloke with 3 or 4 dogs running about. That's possible. But we've had the same kind of report from the opposite side of Danes Dyke by the guy who used to do the security on the Links golf course, Dean Dealtree. One particular evening, Dean took his 2 Staffordshire Bull Terriers to the edge of the dyke because he'd heard something. He said, and there was something charging about in the trees, like he likened it to, you know, when the chimpanzees do a display and they're smashing trees and banging. He said it was like that. He said, now my dogs are quite bold and normally they'd have ran in. He said they just stood rigid, they wouldn't go in. He said, I said, what did you do? He said, I turned and went back to my apartment. Now, Dean's a big fella, like, do you know what I mean? And it unnerved him. Another story which I'd forgot about from Danes Dyke. Years ago, before they put a gate on it, because you can get down to the seashore, you know, the Danes Dyke part of the cove there. There's a steel gate on it now, but years ago there were no gate on it. And 2 anglers, beach anglers, we'll call them rock beach, it's a sort of semi-rock and beach down there, took their cars down to do a bit of night fishing. One of them said he'd had enough and left, and the other one, he says, well, I'm going to have a few more hours. Well, he met up with him the following day. He said, I'm not staying down there again on my own ever. He said, what do you mean? He said, well, after you'd gone, he said, all the trees, and I'm not saying all the trees, but trees, big trees started shaking. He said, well, no wind. He says, and something were banging the trees and they were shaking. Once again, listeners, it could have been people frightening the rock angler. Do you know? The guy who took his dog for a walk in Danes Dyke, there could have been somebody further in the dyke with dogs letting them run about erratically. I don't think that for 1 minute with the security guard from the golf course, because he said it was so, you know, this was highly unusual, and in the place that it was, you couldn't run around there in the night. I mean, Danes Dyke, honestly, it goes down at quite an angle. It's very steep, and whatever it was charging about, you'd have broke bones.
We can transpose all what you've seen and all what other people have reported to you, Paul, on Cryptids, if you want to give it a culminative name, as to what's been happening around the world. Now, there's a famous one, the Wisconsin Beast of Bray Road. Can you tell us anything about that one?
A little bit, Les. I don't know loads about it. I think the principal researcher there is Linda Godfrey. I think she's done a fabulous job, and she's written a book about it as well, and highly recommended. I don't know the lady, but southern winds constant, and I think this creature, not sounding unlike what's reported at Flixton and around the area, that and in the forests of East and North Yorkshire, well, North Yorkshire particularly, reluctant to say werewolf, Dogman type entity. 1936, I think that's earliest reports of this thing, Les. And I think it was prolific in 1980s reports of it, but ever since there's been a steady sort of drip of reports of this upright humanoid as well as canine looking creature. I mean, when we say these things, I'm not necessarily believing that something's transforming from man to beast. I can't believe that any more than anyone else can. I suppose anything's possible, but until somebody's shown you something or given you proof, then you can't say, oh, that's what's happening. But I remain open-minded that there's a reality that these things do exist. And as I said, the Beast of Bray Road, I mean, it's reported to be over 7 foot tall, and in various reports weighing between 400 and 700 pounds. I know there's a big variation there, but somebody else's perception of, I don't know, a bear, you know, you might get somebody looking at it and going, oh, it weighs about 350 pounds. In reality, it might weigh 500. It's difficult to say. But yeah, these humanoid type canine creature, the Beast of Bray Road, is not unlike what's reported at Flixton, Les. And you know, as I say, I don't know tons about it, but I've heard it also reported as looking like a hyena, you know, facially. And how many reports have we heard of people saying similar things? I mean, the paratrooper on the cliff tops at Bempton, February the 9th, 2019, with the other guy. That's the first thing he said. He said it looked like a hyena. You know, facially, it just looked like a hyena, hunkered down, and then it stood up on 2 legs. What are we looking at? What, you know, it must be a terrifying sight. I don't think that it's some creature that's avoided detection and managed to evolve and eat and predate on animals, and nobody's ever known its existence. And I don't think it's anything new. I think these things will have been there a lot longer than what were reported in 1936, or in the case of the Flixton werewolf, the reports of the strange happenings there in 937 AD, when they built a refuge to protect the travellers from this infestation of savage beasts, lest they be devoured. That's what the writings say. I mean, once again, don't necessarily mean a werewolf, but you know, it's interesting.
I think at this point we'll have to tell the viewers why we're not going with a live stream tonight, and I'll let you say a few words on that.
Yeah, well, I think as everyone knows, or anybody that's interested in what we're doing, we've been talking recently about what we've called the Dark Forest Project, where we're doing filming and gathering information about events that have been happening in the North Yorkshire forests, you know, the national park. And it's particularly interesting. We're a little bit shy on giving out key locations and details. All I can say is we've got some first-class witnesses who've seen something highly unusual in the forests, and in recent years and going back 20 years, but these people have seen a similar thing. Now, I think it's going to be worthwhile to you guys, and you're going to be the first people to sort of get information about it when we finally put it out. I'm not trying to just hype it up for the sake of it. I just think it will be worth it. It's really good. We've got some brilliant help. We've got people doing voiceovers for us that you'll all recognise when you hear us speaking. We've got a fabulous guy doing music for us, who's done music for international stars. We're really, really fortunate to have some fabulous help, great witnesses, and Friday night we will be in the forest. We won't be sleeping. We'll be there all night. We've got thermal cameras, we've got motion sensors, trail cams, infrared cameras, good 4K cameras, and you know, I'm not just saying, oh, we've got this. We're actually throwing everything at it, and that's only going to be one night of many that we're going to be working on the Dark Forest Project. That's just a working title. It might not finish with that, but I think you will like what we're, you know, the end result. And I'm probably piling pressure on Les there, because he'll be responsible for the end result, not me. But yeah, that's about where we're at. And thank you for your support, people.
Yeah, and I'll just second that. Thanks for everybody who's watching this programme tonight. We've got to thank everybody for all the support that they've given us, and we hope that some of the subjects that we've covered tonight and the accounts have been interesting to you. Paul has books for sale. They can be bought on Amazon. Some links will be in our description, and some links will be on this video. So if you want to buy any merchandise book wise, then go out and follow those links. So thanks again everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.